On the map, its name means Green Cape, but from above, Cabo Verde does not look green at all. What you see are volcanic rocks, cracked soil, and islands that wait too long for rain. In many places, fresh water is limited, farming land is scarce, and most of the food people eat does not come from the islands themselves. It crosses the Atlantic first, by ship, before it reaches the dinner table. By simple logic, a country like this should struggle to stand on its own. Cabo Verde has no giant oil reserves, no massive mines, no wide river valleys, and no vast farmland that can feed all of its people. Yet somehow, this small island nation has built one of the more surprising economic stories in Africa. Its standard of living is far higher than many people would expect from a dry, scattered country in the middle of the Atlantic. And that is the strange part. Cabo Verde did not build its economy from the wealth buried under its soil. What it had was the ocean around it, a location the world kept passing by, and one habit passed down through generations, leaving the islands and still keeping them alive from far away. The name Cabo Verde was given by Portuguese explorers in the 15th century. It came from a green, forested cape on the coast of Senegal, a place they passed before reaching these islands. But the islands they found in the Atlantic were very different from that name. The 10 islands were born from volcanic activity. The ground is hard, the slopes are steep, and parts of the country look like a landscape forced to survive under the sun. Cold ocean currents around the islands help suppress moisture in the air, making rainfall unreliable. From the beginning, Cabo Verde was never an easy place to farm. Here, drought is not a rare disaster. It is part of the country's long history. Since the late 18th century, Cabo Verde has faced repeated droughts and famines. In some periods, the cycle returned roughly every 5 years. The damage was made worse by deforestation and overgrazing, which stripped away vegetation that helped the soil hold moisture. Once the trees were gone, the land had a harder time storing water. And when the land could not hold water, one failed rainy season could turn into a national disaster. The consequences were devastating. 3 major droughts in the 18th and 19th centuries killed more than 100,000 people through famine. Then, in the 20th century, 2 of the worst disasters came between 1941 and 1943, and again from 1947 to 1948. Around 45,000 people died. On the island of Fogo, half the population was wiped out. Under Portuguese colonial rule, the word famine was reportedly banned from the press, as if the disaster could be hidden by removing its name. But this is not only a story from the past. In 2018, a long drought dried up the Poilão Dam on Santiago Island. For a country that already struggles to rely on water, this was a warning. It showed how fragile Cabo Verde's agricultural base still is. The numbers tell the same story. In 2000, agriculture made up 9.7% of the national economy. By 2021, that share had fallen to 7.8%. The workforce in agriculture shrank even more sharply, from 23% in 2000 to just 10.6% in 2021. That means fewer people are depending on the land for a living. The reason is not that Cape Verdeans no longer want to farm. The problem is that the land has become harder to work with. There is not enough water. The rainy season is harder to predict, and the cost of keeping agriculture alive keeps rising. Today, drinking water and irrigation increasingly depend on seawater desalination. The technology helps, but it is expensive. Turning seawater into usable water requires a lot of energy. At the same time, most of Cabo Verde's electricity still comes from fossil fuels that have to be imported. So the water problem and the energy problem are tied together. The more water the country needs, the more energy it has to burn. The more energy it needs, the more expensive the whole system becomes. The IMF has described the combination of drought, water scarcity, and dependence on imported fossil fuels as one of Cabo Verde's most basic development challenges. In the dry valleys of Santiago, this problem becomes more human. For the older generation, farming was a way of life. But for many young people, the fields now look like a future that may be too heavy to carry. More of them are leaving family farms, not because they have no connection to the land, but because there is not enough water for everyone who wants to stay. Long before the modern water crisis, Cabo Verde had already found another way to matter. The land did not give much, but its position in the middle of the Atlantic made the islands hard for passing ships to ignore. Since the 15th century, these 10 islands sat along one of the world's important sea routes between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Ships crossing the ocean needed places to stop. They needed supplies, repairs, communication, and a way to connect one continent with another. That is where Cabo Verde began to gain economic meaning. In 1497, Vasco da Gama stopped in the islands during his voyage to India. 2 decades later, in 1519, the first expedition to sail around the world, led by Ferdinand Magellan, passed through the same Atlantic network. For a small island chain with difficult farming conditions, the arrival of these ships revealed one important fact. Cabo Verde may have been poor in natural resources, but its position gave it power. That geographic value also brought one of the darkest chapters in its history. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the islands became a transit point in the Atlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were gathered there before being shipped to plantations across the Americas. Cidade Vela, on Santiago Island, grew into an important port in the triangular trade that linked Africa, Europe, and the Americas. On Santiago and Fogo, sugarcane and cotton plantations expanded through forced labor. The wealth that appeared in the islands did not come from rich soil alone. It came from a brutal system that turned human beings into cargo. When the slave trade was abolished in the late 19th century, that old economic foundation collapsed. Cabo Verde lost the source of wealth that had supported its ports and plantations for centuries. But as happened again and again in the country's history, geography offered another path. This time, it came through steamships, which needed fuel, communication, and stopping points in the middle of the ocean. The port of Mindelo, on São Vicente, became the new center. During the age of steamships, Mindelo became a coaling station and a hub for transatlantic telegraph lines. Ships crossing the Atlantic stopped there to refuel, while telegraph cables connected this small island to the global flow of information. At its peak in the 1920s, almost 2,000 ships a year came through to take on coal. This pattern kept repeating through Cabo Verde's history. Twice, the islands nearly lost the economic base that kept them going. Twice, their location in the ocean opened a new door. The answer did not come from what grew in the soil. It came from the outside world passing around them. Mindelo's golden age did not last forever. As ships moved from coal to oil, the once busy port slowly lost its purpose. Sea routes changed. Vessels no longer needed coaling stations in the same way. At the same time, competing ports such as Dakar and the Canary Islands took over much of the role that had made Cabo Verde important in the Atlantic. Once again, the islands lost one of their economic lifelines. This time, the next path did not come from a new port, a new mine, or a new crop. It came from something more human. Cape Verdeans themselves began to leave. The roots of migration had been planted much earlier. At the beginning of the 19th century, whaling ships from Massachusetts often stopped in Cabo Verde to take on supplies. Men from islands like Brava and Fogo were recruited as crew. Some of them crossed the Atlantic, worked at sea, and eventually settled in the United States. New Bedford became one of the most important places in this story. In that Massachusetts port city, Cape Verdeans worked in whaling, textiles, and other jobs available to immigrants. A small community began to grow. Families formed. The memory of the islands stayed alive. And over time, these early migrants opened a route for relatives, neighbors, and later generations to follow. Some did more than work. A few helped create transatlantic shipping links that carried even more people from Cabo Verde to the United States. What began as labor migration slowly became a powerful social and economic network. From Brava and Fogo, the path to Massachusetts became a way to survive. Then the pattern repeated. Whenever drought, famine, or recession hit Cabo Verde, another wave of migration followed. People left because the islands often could not give them enough options. Leaving became a survival strategy. Over time, it became part of family history. Today, people of Cape Verdean descent live across the world. Large communities are found in the United States, Portugal, France, the Netherlands, Senegal, and other countries. In some estimates, the diaspora is as large as, or even larger than, the population still living in the islands. This means Cabo Verde's economy does not stop at its coastline. Some families live on the islands, others live in cities across the Atlantic. The connection between them continues through money, goods, visits, houses built from abroad, school payments, and monthly support sent back home. That is where the diaspora became an economic force. On paper, these people are not counted as an export. They are not minerals, factory goods, or farm products. But in reality, they became one of the most important exports in Cabo Verde's history. When the land could not feed enough people, and when the ports were no longer as busy as before, people became the bridge between a small island nation and the wider world. Today, Cabo Verde's economy is built around services. Trade, transportation, tourism, and public services make up about 3/4 of national income. Tourism is the main engine, but that engine depends heavily on Europe. When Europe slows down, the number of visitors coming to Cabo Verde can slow down with it. The problem is that Cabo Verde also runs large trade deficits almost every year. Most basic needs have to be imported, from food and fuel to consumer goods. That gap is covered by foreign development aid and money sent home by the diaspora. In 2024, remittances were equal to 12.3% of Cabo Verde's GDP, one of the highest ratios in sub-Saharan Africa. For such a small country, that is a huge number. Money sent by families abroad does more than help individual households. It helps keep national consumption moving. Foreign reserves also matter. By the end of 2025, Cabo Verde's international reserves stood at around 1.06 billion euros, enough to cover more than 5 months of imports. That gives the country some breathing room, but for a nation so dependent on goods from abroad, that cushion still has to be protected carefully. This is where Cabo Verde's weakness becomes clear. Two of its most important sources of money are outside the country's direct control: tourists who come from other continents and diaspora communities working abroad. If one of them is disrupted, the effects can reach ordinary homes very quickly. That is the price of Cabo Verde's economic model. The country has managed to build an economy out of geographic limits, but that success always carries the same risk. Cabo Verde can grow when the outside world is moving well, and it can shake when the outside world begins to stumble. Since the early 1990s, Cabo Verde has been known as one of Africa's more stable democracies. Power changes through elections. Opposition parties can win. Political shifts usually happen without major unrest. That stability appeared again after the municipal elections in December 2024. The opposition PAICV's victory led to a cabinet reshuffle and sent an important political signal ahead of the legislative elections scheduled for April 2026. Cabo Verde's semi-parliamentary system also allows the president and prime minister to come from different parties without freezing the country for too long. For a small nation that depends heavily on outside trust, that kind of political stability is a major asset. Scarcity has also shaped its politics. Cabo Verde does not have giant oil fields, huge mines, or vast farmland that political elites can fight over. So political competition is not centered on capturing one massive source of natural wealth. Its debt structure is also relatively safer than that of many developing countries. Around 2/3 of Cabo Verde's external debt is held by multilateral lenders such as the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the IMF, mostly in the form of concessional loans. For a country that depends on tourism, diaspora money, and international support, stability is more than politics. It is part of how Cabo Verde keeps the trust of the outside world, so money, investment, and support can continue to flow. Cabo Verde is now trying to push back against its water crisis with technology. In São Domingos, a solar-powered desalination plant was built through a partnership with Hungary, worth roughly tens of millions of dollars. The project adds nearly 900,000 cubic meters of water per year, benefiting more than 1,000 farmers. For a country that has depended so heavily on unreliable rain, this matters. Seawater is being turned into irrigation water, so farming does not have to wait entirely for a rainy season that is becoming harder to predict. On a very different stage, Cabo Verde has also made history in sports. The country qualified for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. its first appearance in the men's tournament. For a nation this small, global attention like that is about more than soccer. It is a form of recognition that the country rarely gets through ordinary economic channels. A name that often disappears on the map of the Atlantic suddenly appeared on screens around the world. Cabo Verde's next bet runs in two directions, making life inside the islands a little safer through water and technology, while keeping the outside world connected, interested, and willing to come. These 10 volcanic islands never had a giant mine to dig, oil to pump, or endless farmland to cultivate. What they had was the ocean around them, shipping routes that happened to pass nearby, and people who repeatedly chose to leave when their homeland could no longer support them. From that habit of leaving, Cabo Verde found a way to stand. People left the islands, worked in distant countries, and sent part of their lives back home. In the United States, especially in places like Massachusetts and Rhode Island, Cape Verdean communities became part of that long connection across the Atlantic. For many peoples, this pattern may sound familiar through immigrant families who keep supporting relatives back home. But in Cabo Verde, this is not just a family story. It has become part of the country's foundation. The islands may look dry from the sky, but Cabo Verde survives through something a map cannot easily show: the long bond between a small country and the people who left it, yet never fully let it go.